Creating good compositions and refining your typography is not only the thing you need to do in InDesign, but before you actually send your work to print, there's a couple of very important decisions you have to make, and we have to go through a process we call proofing, in which you can check colors and also the copy, and only if everything is in the good shape, then you can save your PDF. So I'm going to walk you through these steps here with proofing your colors. Now this is a huge topic, and there can be a separate course only on printing, but I'll try to explain everything in a nutshell. So that shall give you enough professional print ready PDFs for InDesign. So the first thing you need to remember is that almost every image and photograph you are working with is by default in RGB mode, which is very different from CMYK color mode that you need for printing. So do you need to convert all your images to CMYK before you bring them into InDesign? That's one of the first questions. Well, you don't have to, but you can. But because at the very end, you save your PDF, most of your settings and default settings will convert the RGB images into CMYK. And to reproduce color and continuous tone images or photographs, printers usually separate the artwork into 4 plates. So one plate for cyan, one for yellow, one for magenta, and one for black portions of the image. And the process of dividing the image into 2 or more colors is called color separating. The films from which the plates were created are called separations. Now you probably notice we have a few panels here which we haven't used before. So one of them is called separations preview. And I have a flattener preview and attributes. So I place my swatches panel here at the bottom in this video because I'm going to focus on working with these. Now the ones that you haven't seen before, you can find under the Windows menu here, and go to the output, and you can find all the panels that are used in here, and you can get the color swatches for the swatches panel as well. So if I choose preview, I can show you that I can currently all the colors of the document are visible, but if I turn it off, for example cyan and magenta and black, and then we will see exactly the areas where the yellow ink will be used. And you can tell by looking at this page, although we mainly had green and blues on the photograph, there's quite a lot of yellow on the majority of the spread. Now we could also check maybe magenta, and same goes for cyan as well. Now the darker region in the separation preview, the more of that ink is needed. And if I want to see them all together, I can select CMYK color, and notice that we have also a Pantone color here, which we can also see in preview separately. Just to return back a second to the difference between RGB and CMYK, I want to show you an option called Proof Colors in InDesign. From the View menu, you can go to the Proof Colors here. You can select and get a proof how the images will look once they are converted to CMYK. So you will see that there is a slight difference, and most commonly it's a slightly desaturated version of the RGB images. So if you want to work in this mode, you can keep the proof colors on, and that way your Images can be previewed in whatever proof setting you have here. So the proof setup is currently set to CMYK. I can choose a custom here and change it to something else, and even preview the colors of specific printer or specific papers. Just to show you, I can go to custom, and these are all the color profiles that I have on my computer, and I could switch on to any of these and to preview them whenever the proof colors option is selected. So if you want to make sure that your work on the screen looks as close as possible to the final result, you probably need to first of all calibrate your screen and then also have the proof colors setting assigned with the profile that will be used for printing process. So this is more important than to have actually CMYK images in your documents, but there is no harm of having turned them into CMYK before you actually place them into InDesign. Now let's see what else you can see for this panel. So I already mentioned we can switch between the color palettes and preview, which is one here. So if I turn off black, notice that this block here disappears. And notice that here it doesn't disappear. There's a quick way of spotting a rich black in the document, which is a swatch you can set up yourself, and we normally call a swatch rich black if it has not only black on full intensity but additional C and Y values. To show you this swatch, I'm going to double click on this swatch here. I'm just going to create here one swatch that is a rich black. This is going to be a rich black, and let's say I go back here, I choose this, and I'm going to select this color. If I close down the valley here, say I choose this and work with this, give it stroke rather than inset. So maybe I'll just shift X. Okay. So as you can see, this is a, here I got extra stroke. I'll just remove that. Okay. So as you can see that the rich black will tell you that we have 100 cyan and 100 magenta and 100 yellow. It's a common practice to use this in print if you want a richer and fuller black in print. And to check and find it quickly on the page, it's just simply just turn off the black separation, and then you can still see a block in place of a black rectangle, just like so. Here I placed it. Even if I switch the black off, you will still see the gray. Let me just switch back to show here and show it to you again. This has the rich black, and you can immediately notice, even if I turn off black, we still have the dark values there. Also, the text you notice here disappears because it is not using a rich black. They are just simply using normal black. But if you want to find out more about anything that I mentioned here, I recommend to read it into and also discuss these things with your printers. If you have any doubts about any terms and definitions that I'm mentioning, as I said, this is more like a summary of the terms that you should be familiar with. But normally, as a designer, you don't have to make all the decisions. You need to collaborate and work with your printers and ask them the questions that you are not 100% sure of. Most of the time, they will be happy to help and explain things for you because it saves them time. And if you make the effort to prepare everything ready for print, it generally helps avoiding having any problems in the future. So another thing we can see here in the separations preview is the Pantone color, which is again another swatch that I added. So we can see that in here I explained previously how to add Pantone colors and spot colors in general. And the good thing is that we can immediately spot it if there's not only processed colors using in the document, so not just CMYK, but also a spot color, a Pantone color in this case. But if you want to see exactly where it shows in the page, you can just quickly turn it off. And there you can see it will highlight immediately on the page. Now it is possible to use these custom inks called spot colors in addition to or in place of process colors. For example, using 4 process colors to produce an artwork consisting of black text and bluish green lines, you can use these custom inks called spot colors in addition to or in place of process colors. And normally the main reason why we use it is the consistency in case of like brand colors, to assure wherever it is printed will be the same exact color. Or you can also spot inks and to produce colors not reproducible by CMYK inks, such as fluorescent and metallic colors and more vibrant saturated colors. Once again, it is hard to mix from CMYK inks. Now spot colors can actually be used in InDesign for special treatments like spot varnish, emboss, and other coatings as well, which you might have seen in the visiting cards. And these have to be handled as a separate color in addition to your process colors. So I'll show you how to prepare this. For example, if you want this image to have a complex varnish color over it, I could just create first of all a new spot color. So I go to here, create new color swatch. I can immediately switch to a spot here. Then I can decide what color I want to use for this, maybe a full magenta. Then I'm going to click OK. And once this done, notice that this immediately comes up here in the separations preview. Now if I use my frame tool, I'll just zoom in a bit. As a stroke here, just remove the stroke, click and drag. I will draw a frame over this frame again. There. And then having the fill color selected, I will choose the color that I created here, new color swatch, and there have created the overfill. Now it's very important that wherever you use the spot varnish, you have to also check the overprint fill options in the attribute panel. So once again, I'll just go here and get my attribute panel, attributes, check overprint fill. So it will be registered not to be printed but used as a special coating. So now if I zoom back, I can use again the separations preview. To turn this option on or off. And see immediately where I use the varnish. And that's one last thing about this panel is that you can change the separations to ink limit, where you can choose what percentage is the one that you want to check. So for example, by default, 300% will show that any area where you have more density than 300% ink coverage, and it's the reason why we have this option, because too much ink on the paper can cause drying problems, because it's best to ask for the commercial printer for the maximum ink coverage of the press you will be printing on. So then you can preview the document to identify these areas that exceeds the press's limit, and you will have to do the amends on your images or your composition alternatively, and you might need to change paper on which the job is going to be printed on. So you can see there's quite a lot of things to think about when it comes to printing, but generally the separations preview will help you to identify flaws and potential problems, but that's not something to be scared about. All these technical aspects of printing process, because as a designer, if you don't know anything about this, you can always rely on your printers, and they will guide you through and help you how to set up your document and InDesign. We'll be working on another aspect of colors. It is still important to check and understand how it works, and that is the transparency for which we have the panel called Flattener Preview. If your document or artworks contain any transparency, it usually needs to undergo a process called flattening before it can be printed. Now, flattening divides the transparent artwork into areas which can be vector based or rasterized, and as your artwork and page composition become more complex, it will also affect the flattening and its result. The good news is, depending on the PDF format you're going to export your work into, you might be able to avoid flattening, because you can retain the transparency without flattening if you save your file as Adobe PDF 1.4 or later, which is the Acrobat 5.0 or standard. Now, if you take a look at file export, choose PDF for print and save. We have this here. I can choose the compatibility, that is PDF 1.4 or higher, and that will be able to handle the transparency without flattening. But if you want to save this as Acrobat 4 in case, then you can choose this and go to the advanced settings. You will find this feature called Transparency Flattener, and you can choose what resolution you want to work with. Generally, it's a good idea to choose the resolution high for getting better quality, and you can get a bit more options if you use the Flattener Preview panel. So first of all, here in the panel menu, I'll just activate the Transparency Flattener. The output, Transparency Flattener, that's our flattener, okay. Just dock it right there. So way to off, maybe set it right like so. Set this to something else, Essentials Classic, maybe my workspace, and I'll just go ahead here. In case you run across this kind of, you can just go ahead and reset this. We'll come back to the actual settings. I'll just close this tab group, and I will add only what's necessary. That's separations preview, flattener preview, dock it right like so, and the color I had that swatches. Alright, so I've just docked all these together and set it them right like so. Okay. Now, so a flattener preview. Transparency flattener presets, where you can choose and check which one of these will work for you. And if you want, you can create new presets by clicking on new presets and then customizing them, say full vector or anything from here. PPI is pixel per inch. For line art and text resolution, and for gradient and mesh resolution you have 144. If you want, you can convert all text to outlines and so on and so forth. Again, this is a big topic. I'm not going to go into detail and explain every feature. I'm just going to mention how to access the most important and crucial aspects of it, and show you an example here in this page where I have the transparency applied on this fill color. Now if I select this frame, and see, if I go to preset effects here, transparency, I can see that the object transparency has been brought down to 85%. I'll just keep the object transparency full. Maybe to bring down the fill opacity, right like so. 60%. Click on here. So let's say if I increase this to 100%, and that's how it would look like. I can reduce it down, or I can also use a blend mode, which I would also require a transparency flattening. But if we use Acrobat for standard, so let me just cancel that out of this. Just choose the fill as 67%. Okay. To show you the flattener preview, so I can select this option called transparent objects, and there immediately on the page or on the whole spread I can find all those areas where transparency will appear. So there's one here and one at the bottom as well. Now this is something I might have missed without using the flattener preview panel. But now if I switch back to none, I can tell that this is the drop shadow effect, and that's again something we might require flattening for, again depending on the version of PDF you are creating. Now my recommendation is that you should avoid flattening if possible, because it cannot be undone after your file PDF is saved, and it could lead to issues later on. But if your printer tells you that you need to save and flatten all the transparency, then make sure you use the high resolution and double check your printer what else you need to keep in mind. Now once again, and this is not something you would have to deal with all the time, but it is good to be aware of something features like this. Now we are going to use proof all the copy that you have in your document. InDesign offers quite a lot of different ways of proofing your copy, and probably the best place to start is the Preflight option, which you can find here in the bottom status bar. This is the Preflight option. Say I were to go to this page, this particular page. Say I'll just bring this quite down. And there, I created one error, that is an overset text here. So immediately you see in your Preflight panel, you have one error showing up. If I double click on this, I will find exactly what error that we have here. And if I double click on here, text, it will take me exactly where this is happening. So let's say I were into this page, double click on here, it will take me exactly where the error is. So it is a link to the page and just takes me to that page and highlights the frame where I have the overset text. Now if you ever have this problem in InDesign, it will automatically include it as an error in Preflight, and it will also prompt you with a warning before you export the PDF. So a quick and easy way to fix this is obviously creating the frame size. So if I drag this a little bit further, like it was before, and set out the text, and now you can see it shows no errors, they will be gone. And at the bottom, InDesign is happy again. If we want to make changes, how the Preflight works, this is something we discussed already previously. Just as a remember, you can go into the define profiles, click here, define profiles, and you can check, for example, what is the basic Preflight consist of. You can see it has the categories for text, overset text, font missing is by default, it will be on. And you also have several other options you can turn on and save as your custom Preflight profile. Testing here is even like minimum type here. Like here, the minimum type size. You can just activate this and type in the size, what would be the minimum size you would allow, and anything lower than that will be considered as an error and be highlighted in the Preflight panel. It is worth going through all of these options, and it will help you to automate looking for any errors and issues with your copy. But the Preflight is not really for looking for grammatical problems in your copy. So for example, here in the first paragraph, I made a mistake. Let's just give OK and cancel this. Say I'll make a mistake here intentionally. Say I type right like so, maybe jungles. Now if I go to edit, and here I have a spelling option. Check spelling. InDesign will automatically find out the spelling mistake, which I can then change by the suggestions listed below. So I can select this jungles and click on change, and now you can see it automatically got updated in my copy. So this will update, and then of course in this case we have the placeholder copy for the rest of the text, and is going to try to replace all of these, but I'm going to just ignore for now. I won't spend more time on check spelling feature because it is very self-explanatory and it works very similarly to other applications like Word. But I want to show that there is another feature which might be useful for proofing your copy, and that is dynamic spelling, which you can turn on or enable the way every time you want to type something automatically and add an underline for any issues. Say I remove the N here from the jungles. Then click away. Now activate the dynamic spelling here. It immediately got underlined. I can just right click on here. It'll give me the suggestions. This is only visible in normal view and not in the preview mode. So once again, if I go back and turn it off, you won't have any warnings. So check spelling and dynamic spelling are both useful. And there is another very important feature in InDesign called track changes, which can help you if you work in a team and you need to suggest changes to the copy to your editor. And for example, if you want to keep track of all these changes and suggestions, I'll show you again how this feature works under the Windows menu. Go to Editorial, and there you have Track Changes option. Click on that and that will open up some panel like this. And if you have to double click inside the frame to look at this, let's say I'll just go in here and so now it is going to be tracking this whole text frame or the whole story. But when I'm inside one of my stories in a document, I can also use the drop down from panels menu and choose enable tracking all story. Tracking all stories. So it would apply to the whole document, or at the same way I can also disable them. And now what does that actually mean? Now if I change any of these words, it will just even simply remove them and will automatically be tracked, and you won't see it here in the layout view. We'll have to switch into the story editor. Let's just say I'll remove this tropical here. Now I'll press Ctrl Y, and there you can see I removed the tropical. It comes out as a striked out word, which means when I click on it, it will be detected by unknown username on this specific date and time. So why it is saying unknown user? Because under the file menu there is a feature called user, and that is where you can set up your username. So let's say I can type in here my name as InDesign. Let me just go creative here in designer and go ahead and give OK. Now I can also choose the color in case that is highlighting the gold color. So as I'm gonna go to my layout view and maybe change the rivers to lakes. Let's go here. Lakes. And go back to my layout again. You can immediately see that shows up the deleted word and the replaced word. So there's an edit text and also deleted text at the same time, but now it says, click on here, it's done by the InDesigner. So these suggestions will only show in the story editor view. It won't affect your actual print or PDF, but as long as you have your InDesign file, whoever is going to decide what happens to the next text will have changes in the track changes panel. Open up the story editor for the copy and go through each of these changes and either approve them or accept them or reject them. Say I go here and maybe I'll reject this one and it'll come back again. If I go here, I can reject all the changes in story, and I can just reject both of these. But if I accept all these changes, it will accept it as lakes, and the error will be moved on. And that way I can tell that I went through all the changes in there and there is nothing showing here. It means to have done my reviewing the story. So the track changes panel is another useful option. You can add two sets of panels which can normally be used at the end of proofing the document. And these are the most important crucial features of proofing a document. Now we will be working on exporting our work as PDF ready for print. After proofing our colors, transparency and the copy, we should be ready to create our PDF, but there's still some couple of things worth mentioning before we hit the final export button. One of the most important things that can be easily overlooked is the bleed for the document. Now, in this example, I intentionally left out to show you that how I can be fixed at the end. So because I have this image in the background and that it runs all the way to the edges, that would be a big problem. If I save this as it is and send it to print, because they will warn me that I haven't used any bleed, that can result in a bit of a white gap around the edges and it wouldn't look professional enough. So we need to go to the file menu, choose document setup. Here we can, even at the later stage, add the bleed to the document. Now I would usually recommend using 3mm bleed, and if you need any instructions added as well, I would use 13mm slug. Just one slug to all. Okay, so all around the document, and that's something I'm going to show you why I would use in this case. So once I have these set up, it will be applied on all my pages, but I have to make sure I would have to make changes to my image as well. So clicking on here, I'll just extend my image, holding Control Shift. And at this corner as well. And I will give this command of fill frame proportionally. And then it will automatically fit around the edges. Now it should go all the way into the red edge, which means I have additional 3mm axis that will be trimmed off, but it will allow a perfect print for all the way to the edges. Now if you have anything else around the edges, like text frame or even things like on the master page, you should make sure that everything is going to be on the red edge and not the actual trim edge. So if I go to my master page document, click on here, double click here and there, I will just have to make sure that these points are dragged out all the way to the red edge, and I would do that with the other side as well. I'll use the direct selection tool, click and drag. Okay. And we'll do the same in the other side as well. Like this. Both of these. Control T. Shift Control T. Get this. Click here. And here, and move this right like so. Just select the page here, maybe double click on this page. Give a tab a bit. Okay. Now if I go to my regular page, it has made the change right like so. If I press W, it will come exactly properly. Just to preview that what would my bleed would look like. It will come exactly the way I wanted it to be. So between preview or having the bleed cut off and together with bleed, which we use for preparation. So I mentioned in one of the earlier lessons that if you use spot varnish for this example, I'll just rename the spot varnish. Spot varnish. Give OK. It immediately will update here. I want to show you that in case you do that, you should also create a separate layer, which I have created here. I would normally call that one spot varnish or coating or special coating or something like that. You should place, of course, all of the objects that will be indicating where this varnish needs to go into the layer. But also when you double click on the layer, you can make sure it is not going to be printed. Say I want to go to the layer here and Control X, take a new layer here, edit, paste in place, and I'm going to call this varnish. Give OK. You turn off the print layer option, it will give OK. It will be converted into italics here in the name of the layer. But if you try the separations and preview is turned on, separations, it will be able to tell that this is not actually printed on the layer. Limit off. It is just a region that is going to be using for varnish. And to make sure that your printer will know this, you can also use slug area to add your instruction. I could use the type tool and add a frame here in the slug area. Say spot varnish to be used with specified spots color. You can drag here and type in here spot varnish. And maybe I'll just increase the size of the text. Alright. So the reason I mentioned this is at the very end because these are probably even more important than the earlier ones. They are like to be flagged by your printers and requiring you, the designer, to make these changes. And of course, the best to set up everything in the beginning already with the bleed and the slug. And as you go along and add spot varnish, for example, you do that already on a separate layer, which is set to non-printing. And then when all of these things are done, you can finally go to the file menu and choose one of these Adobe Print PDF presets. Or you can just simply go to export and set everything by yourself. Choose print here, Adobe PDF print, and give save. So I'm going to use the PDF print, but we will look at the PDF interactive option in later. Once you have the PDF print option selected, you will be greeted by this dialog box where you can first decide the preset you're using. Case here is PDF X1A 2001 is a very common standard that we use. It is an ISO standard, and the only problem with this standard is that only compatible up to Acrobat 4. So not the other options about that, and we already discussed that this, although is a very generally used standard, you might want to avoid transparency being flattened, and in that case you would probably need to use a higher version like X4 maybe. But like always, it's best to check your printer what they prefer out of the standards and the compatibility. Apart from the things up here, you will be able to define which range of document you want to export, whether you want to save all of them or some particular range. You want to export as having pages or spreads, or join together into spreads. And then you have marks and bleeds. In case I'm going to use the document settings, here you can include slug area. You can also use the crop marks, which will turn on in case you use a bleed, because you want these crop marks to show up in your PDF. And to make sure they're actually aligned to your bleed settings, you would have to turn on this option as well, and also include slug area. Under the output set options, you want to have color conversion, and destination set to CMYK. So that's the feature that I mentioned earlier. If you're using RGB images, and at the very end you can convert them automatically during the process of creating your PDF. And if you have any doubts about which colors you use in the document, you can still check it through the ink manager. And where you can see your process color and any additional spot colors. It is a good place to spot if you have any unnecessary spot colors. But if you're very happy with everything you have, and you can go ahead with these settings. Okay, you can move on to the advanced step where you can decide what should happen to the fonts. And in case you're using Acrobat 4, you would see the transparency flattening option here, but most of the time you don't really have to do anything here. And after that, you need to check the final security options for your PDF. You can set a password for opening the document or even have a password for restricting printing. Now these options as well now will be disabled depending on the compatibility and standard that you select. If you need these features to make sure that you use the right compatibility, and before you export the document, you can click everything that used under summary. And if you want to use the same settings in the feature, just hit save preset. And so then in the future, you can select it from the drop down menu. And that will have already all the settings that you used before. From here it will be accessed. Now everything is good to go. You can just click on export. And if you don't have any errors, it should just go ahead and export the PDF, which will then look like, let me just check, export PDF. Intro magazine is on the desktop. So let's go to desktop here, open here. And there you have your PDF. These are the crop marks on the edges with the bleed, also with the instruction in the slug settings. All these colors are looking fine. I have opened the PDF in the Google Chrome, where I should be able to do a lot more again for preparing this PDF for printing process. And mostly the changes are made using the Acrobat Pro. But usually as a designer, this is how far you need to take the project, and this is where you hand it off to the printer. If you find any issues, they will get in touch with you and ask you to make all the changes. But if you've done your job well, then you can send it and be worry free about the work, and you'll see again it in your beautiful printed format. So we need to explore one more tip. If you need to send a PDF just as a preview, I would recommend you to select the smallest file size preset, export from here. This is for someone just to preview your work on the computer. But if you want to be even more professional, you can use the Publish Online feature, which is in the Creative Cloud. CC version. We will be exploring the interactive formats of InDesign. Now, last thing you want to do would be making a package document for your InDesign file. That we will be exploring now. There is one more very important feature for archiving and finalizing your projects in InDesign. This feature you can find under File menu, and it's called Package. Now the reason why we need this is because whenever you work in InDesign, it's not always enough to keep your INDD file saved, but you should also export the final work as package, which we will make sure that all the linked images and all the fonts we used will be stored in one safe location. The last thing you want is to come back to a project where you need to make changes, let's say weeks or months or even years after it was created first, and then find out all the images are missing and all the fonts are missing, and then you can spend hours or in worst cases days of fixing these issues. So to avoid that situation, you would always want to archive projects as package. And it is a very simple thing. All you need to do is go to the file menu, go to the package option, or you can activate this using Ctrl Alt Shift P. Here, first of all, you want to make sure that there is no missing links found. 0 missing, 0 embedded, RGB space and all that, 8 fonts used and so on, so details. As long as that there's no issues like it, you should be okay to go ahead. But if you want to have a closer look at all the fonts used, you can check them in the fonts tab, and colors even, print settings. But if you're happy with everything in here, you can just click on package. Where InDesign will prompt you to save the document first, and once it's saved, it will give you a printing instruction message. Where you can fill in these details to find out. Say I would want to save this in here and save. Of course, I want to save in this folder. It'll ask me for this particular settings. It will also ask me to save a PDF format where I can select which one I would want to have that. So this will finally saved in one folder here. I can just go ahead and give package. Give OK. Give OK. These fonts are currently available. I'll just give OK, and then it will start packaging the document. Normally, if you work in-house, for example, you would have a code name, maybe, I don't know, 657, which relates to the project itself, and it probably would be actually in the beginning. So I can say final. Then by default, the fonts and links will be all included in this package. If I want, I can include the IMDL file as well, which would be a backward compatible version of InDesign file, and also PDF, wherever preset you prefer, will be included. Not that this is necessary, I quite like to have the option in there. Just if I quickly need to send the PDF, it will be available within the package. And also it will help people who doesn't have InDesign to be able to see what this project is about. And once I'm ready, I have done that, and now I can check what's inside. So just go ahead in here, save this in the exercise files. Here it is, Venture Magazine folder. I can find all my documents saved here. This is IMDL that I chose to save. These are the links. These are the images used here, and the documents that I had here, and the PDF version as well here. So as long as this package folder is stored somewhere on a server or a backup drive, I can rest easy knowing that all my hard drive work is safe and I won't have any issues coming back to this project and make changes to this. But packaging is not only useful for archiving, it's useful for moving projects between computers. So if you ever start working, let's say on laptop, then you need to transfer files onto your desktop computer again, and you should create a package to avoid having any same problems, missing links and missing fonts. Important thing about package is you won't even have to bother installing all these fonts in case you don't have them on the new computer. But once you open the InDesign file, the fonts will be automatically activated with the exception of Typekit font. They won't be included in your package, but as long as you are working in the same Creative Cloud account on both machines, that shouldn't be a problem again, because they are automatically synchronized wherever you set up your CC account. So you always need to save a package every time you make a change in document. Not necessarily. That is something I would do at the end of the project or whenever I need to transfer my work from one machine to another. But I also worked in agencies at every stage, or every change that we did to a project was saved as a separate package. It really depends on how you like to work or how you're instructed to work. As long as you are familiar with the package work, what's the purpose of using them, you are already on the right track. Now we have covered about exporting the file, and next we will be looking at creating and working with interactive formats in InDesign.